So let me tell you a little bit about myself. Nurse Vietnam veteran. I served for almost 5 years in the Army Nurse Corps, and 1 year was at the 12th Evacuation Hospital at Cu Chi in Vietnam. And I was there in 1967, and my hospital was the largest user of fresh blood in all of Vietnam, so that should tell you something about my experience. We were right beside the hobo woods where everything was happening. I'm also a nurse psychotherapist, and I have been working with civilians and veterans that have been traumatized for 29 years. And then the last 7 years of my life, I have read everything there is to read about military sexual trauma, and I interviewed over 58 women veterans from World War II all the way up to current. And during that time, I was writing this book. It's called Women Under Fire, Abuse in the Military. It's about the culture of abuse toward women in the military. What I did, the way I started out, I didn't start to write this particular book. I started out writing about women's service in the military. And then I started getting these horrific stories of abuse, which I didn't really know about. So then I was kind of following that for a while, and then, and I've never written before. So this is the first book I've ever written. And so in 2009, I took what I had to an editor. His actual title is called Book Doctor, right? So I took it to him to say, this is what I've been doing, give me feedback, what do I need to do now, where I need to go with this. And he gave me an enormous amount of feedback, very, very specific. But the key thing that he said to me was, you need to focus on what's happening to these women and focus on the culture of abuse toward women in the military, because nobody knows about it. So for me, because I had a personal connection to all the women I interviewed, so it was an emotional experience for me to get that feedback. Because as I was getting agreement from all these women to tell me their stories, I didn't tell them I was focusing on the culture of abuse, because I wasn't, right? So that was the first thing that happened to me. I had to work through that emotionally myself and get clear. And then it took me about 3 months. And then I realized that I had an inspiration which clarified for me that I actually had 2 books. I have this one, and then the second one is Women Under Fire, PTSD and Healing. And it's about PTSD and healing, which I really did want to write about. And so I decided to do what this man had suggested, because the more I read and the more I got stories, the more I realized this is a really horrific thing that's going on, and I don't think anybody knows about it. So I thought I would write about it. It was not my intention to not focus on the men, but it was really to focus in on the culture of abuse toward women, which actually does exist.
Absolutely, and it exists for men also, yes.
Yeah, and so I don't know enough about that to write about it, but I have been meeting more and more survivors and getting their stories and really understand. And so I'm hoping one of the men will do that story.
It is so hard to come out because they say, oh man, I'm so what, you got molested a few times or whatever. But
right.
Is this
soldier on?
Yeah, soldier on, right. That's right. Yeah. So, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about some men as I talk about this. So, so the first thing is, what is military sexual trauma? It's any sexual abuse in the military, from sexual harassment, assault to rape, and in all the different forms, right? And the key thing about it, it's against your will, right? There is no consent, period. It's against your will. It can involve coercion, pressure, manipulation, threats of any kind, including negative consequences for not cooperating. It can even be better treatment for giving them what they want, right? It includes force and inability to give consent, such as use of alcohol, being drugged. Many of the rapes, women and men, they're drugged. And we can talk a little bit later about the criminal element that I think is responsible for a lot of this. So military sexual trauma is a personal and sexual boundary violation, and it affects the person physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So I'm going to be talking mostly about women, mainly because that was the focus of my work. But a lot of what I'm going to say applies also to men. So what happens, a woman, if she's attacked, she experiences extreme vulnerability, helplessness, shame, humiliation, a breach in her sense of self, and her sense of bodily integrity. Her self-esteem and self-confidence are lowered. And I believe all of that also happens to men, because it does affect your sense of bodily integrity. And those of you that have had direct experience will probably could, say yay or nay to that. So if, again, women or men, if a brother soldier is the attacker, or if it's someone of a higher rank, and if the unit, your unit, and the military corps is considered family, which is what often is promoted, then you just experienced incest. The attack is basically incest. You were violated by one of your own. So then the other thing that happens is you experience betrayal. You were betrayed by people you're supposed to be able to trust, right? So women are taught, and I suspect it's true for men as well, women are taught from the very beginning in basic training, you can rely on your brother soldiers to protect you. You can rely on them to be your buddy. You can rely on them to have your back. So what happens then when she's assaulted, from the moment of the assault, a woman does no longer feel safe or protected, and she no longer believes that she'll be treated respectfully or protected. So she experiences a clear violation of the very values that are taught in the military: honor, respect, accountability, and fellowship, all violated by that act. So she knows she can't count on her brother soldiers anymore, whether they're same level or ranking above her. It's a grievous psychological injury. So it's an assault on her or you as a male, on your person, your sense of self, and your soul. And it leaves her reeling in confusion, shock, shame, dismay, disintegration, and dissociation. The woman often becomes numb. And so when she becomes numb, and I think this may happen for men also, but again, I don't have enough experience, I don't want to talk about that without knowing. She becomes numb, and so she has less access to all of her internal resources, right? So even the ability to speak, to ask for help, or tell what happened, she's cut off from that ability. So Russell Strand, and I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he's a military criminal investigator. He's the chief of the Family Advocacy Law Enforcement Training Division of the military police at Fort Leonard Wood. And he's on our side in terms of really speaking up and out on behalf of those who have been assaulted in the military. But he has a statement that I think says everything. Here it is. Military sexual assault takes away everything you are in a minute. Military sexual assault takes away everything you are in a minute. To me, that almost tells the whole thing. So I want to tell you what happens inside. So when you're assaulted, your body automatically goes into a fight, flight, or freeze response. And so I brought this to show you. So this little piece right here in the brain, this is called the amygdala. So it looks like a little almond in there. Can you see it? Okay. So what happens is that gets activated. And what it does is it releases a cascade of chemicals and hormones into the body, so your body can respond and react very quickly without thinking, right? And that happens whether it's a military sexual assault or whether you're in combat. Was anybody in direct combat here? No? Okay, well, I am, so I know this happens even in combat situations, even when you're being, mortared or something like that. So the body takes over. That's a key thing to remember. The body takes over even before the threat is consciously acknowledged or recognized. So people who have not been assaulted or have not been in combat oftentimes try to think about what would it be like, how will they react under those circumstances. And if they later are in that circumstance, what they discover is they did not react in any way like they thought they would. And it's because of what happens in the brain. So the reason that you don't is because this part of the brain, this right here, this is up here by our forehead inside, this is the prefrontal cortex, okay? So what's happened is this is taking over. This amygdala is taking over and it's running the body. But this part of the brain, which is where we think and we understand things and process a lot of information, it gets shut down. It's automatically shut down because you're under stress. And you have to be able to react. And the body is preparing you to do that very thing. So the trauma gets stuck in the parts of the brain, I just show you, it's the amygdala down in there, and the hippocampus. It gets stuck in those parts of the brain that cannot communicate with thinking and understanding. There is no way to verbalize and describe what's happened because that part that you need to help you do that is not functioning. Okay? So another way to understand this is that our memories are stored in the right side of the brain over here, and they're in pictures and feelings. The way that we express in words is over here on the left side of the brain, right? There actually is something in between those two parts that allows those two parts of the brain to communicate, except in trauma. In trauma, they're not communicating. So that's why a lot of times when people have a horrendous experience, they're not able to actually tell you from front to back, step by step, what happened, who was involved, give you details, descriptions, because of those things that are happening in the brain that actually don't allow it. So that's an important part of trauma that I would really love to educate the military about that because they act as though that the woman is lying because she can't give a coherent explanation, but it's impossible. If you understand this, it's impossible. And this guy, Russell Strand, thank goodness for him because he is trying to teach this to the military. So let's see, the reason I write this is so I won't get off track. So let's see where I am here. I already told you that. So what happens, the brain tracks sounds, smells, sensations, tastes, and emotions. Those are the things that we remember. Like I bet those of you that were in the military, if you're ever in a really stressful situation, you're going to remember certain things like a smell or a sound. That's what's going to stick with you. You're shaking your head. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Smells. I was just talking about that
Yeah.
yesterday.
Olfactory, the smell, is one of the most potent, powerful experiences that we have, and it stays with us a really long time. Like for me, as an operating room nurse in Vietnam, dealing with all of that horrendous mutilation of bodies and blood. And so I could never get the smell of the blood out of my head. I mean, I would take showers and scrub and do everything, and it was just in my head, the smell of my brother's blood, I mean, for a long, long time. So that's what I mean, it's just locked in there. So a survivor, and it sounds like you might be, so a survivor of military sexual trauma, when they're questioned, can literally go back into the trauma with a full body reaction, including increased heart rate, shortness of breath, shaking, sweating, and a dry mouth. They can have all those reactions just when they're being asked about it. And depending on how they're being asked, how devastating that trauma is. So they're re-experiencing the trauma. But when asked open-ended empathic questions, like this would be good for you, Bobby, to know that. So when you ask open-ended empathic questions, survivors are able to give more accurate details. But if a survivor feels doubted, disbelieved, or shamed, they're going to shut it down. And that's basically what happens in the military. Because they do that. So here's another thing about physiology. So when we're attacked, we want to run, get away, fight back, right? One or the other. Whether it's in combat or it's a sexual trauma, whatever it is, that's what we want to do. We want to run away or we want to fight back. We want to do something, right? But in terms of a sexual attack, we're being held down and controlled. So that's not an option. It's not possible to do that. So the person that's being attacked is frozen, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. You can't do fight. You can't do flight. What's left is freeze. And that's the thing that as a trauma therapist, that's what I see all the time is people frozen, right? And then when you're shocked, when you don't know something's coming, that's what happens. I bet everybody knows that one, right? So they're frozen involuntarily. They didn't choose that. And they're being prevented from taking the action that they desire to take, which would be to run or fight or something like that, right? So they're literally helpless and powerless. Their intention to act and the energy to do that has been activated, but the action wasn't completed. So that energy is stuck in their bodies. The energy to run or to fight is stuck in the body and it stays there until there's a way to release it. Have any of you ever seen or known about what happens with animals, like a deer, if a deer is almost hit by a car or if an animal is going to be attacked? Do you know what happens to them if they survive it and after the attack? Does anybody know?
They have a lot of energy.
So what an animal does is an animal will immediately lay down and you will see their whole body shaking and you'll literally see the muscles in their legs, their limbs shaking, fasciculating, right, and all in their torso because they don't have this. We humans have this, and so we don't let ourselves do that. We don't let ourselves just release it like that. So an animal doesn't need therapy after trauma because they do that. They just let it all go. But humans don't. We stop ourselves. So anyway, just know that however long it's been stuck there, it can be released in therapy that knows how to do that. There are some different therapies. Somatic experiencing is one of those. Peter Levine's work. They don't do that at the VA. EMDR and EFT, and I'm actually going to teach you EFT later. So those therapies will help move it through the body. And then it's not stuck in your body anymore, which actually frees you up. Then there's more flow of the kind of energy you need in your body. So military sexual trauma leads to PTSD, And the symptoms begin during the assault. When you can't get away, and you can't move and you can't fight back, you're in it. You're helpless. So with women, they often become numb. They often become numb during the actual attack, numb and dissociate. These responses are automatic and unconscious. They don't have a clue that they did that, but they did it. So her sense of bodily integrity is so violated that she's not able to stay connected fully to her body. And she can't stay connected to the abusive experience. So I don't know, have any of you ever had the kind of trauma or near-death experience where you had an out-of-body experience? Has anybody had that? Okay, so if you recall, when you had that, you probably were looking at your body. Probably didn't even know how the heck you got there. But the thing is, we don't think that way. When it's happening, we're just there observing. So that's what happens, is women get disconnected from the body because they can't, it's just overwhelming. It's overwhelming to have this experience. And so they cannot, it's just impossible to stay connected to their bodies in that experience, and they're actually trying to preserve something of themselves by doing that. And so they literally lift up, energetically lift up from the body. The body is still experiencing everything that's happening. And the words, whatever they're being told, that's, the body's experiencing all of that. So they don't lose any of that, but they're up here and they're observing what's happening to their own body to try to preserve their sense of self for, if they had any future, to preserve it for that, right? So, and that can happen in combat as well. So what we call, it's called dissociation, and it's a splitting off of part of herself, her personality. So that happens whenever our psyche is overwhelmed. Something that's so overwhelming that we can't stay. We basically can't stay. So our essence, our energy basically says, I'm out of here, and up it goes, and it's just very automatic. Let's see. So then in therapy, what we want to do once you're in therapy is we want to try to connect you back up with all of you, right? The VA does not do this, but this is ideally what we want to happen. So if you were in one of those situations and there's part of you and the experience that's split off, we want to bring you back together and make you whole. We want to connect you with your body and all your feelings and help you to work through the events and the trauma and whatever happened. So that's the problem that the therapist has, is to help you to do that. 40 to 60% of women with military sexual trauma go on to have a full-blown case of PTSD. Military sexual trauma is the #1 cause of PTSD among women. So, symptoms. Shame and humiliation, big, men and women. Anxiety and despair, men and women. Feeling dirty and unclean, men and women. Lack of trust in men, that I don't know if that happens to the men. I do know it happens to the women, that they don't trust men after being assaulted by them. Health issues. So remember that energy I said that got stuck in the body? Well, that energy that's stuck in the body has to go somewhere. So it finds a vulnerable place in the body, sets up shop, and creates some illness. A lot of the immunosuppressant illnesses, autoimmune diseases, a lot of those are because of the assault, the feelings that the person has, the self-judgments, and the energy that's got to go somewhere. So it goes systemically in the body. So other issues, problems with intimacy, sexual dysfunction, problems in relationships, poor work performance, misuse of alcohol, and or drugs. So now, where are these? I want to go through this with you. I'm going to give you all a copy of this. So let's go through these, because these are the symptoms, the PTSD symptoms, that can come from military sexual trauma, but also from other kinds of experiences that lead to PTSD. So these are the symptoms of PTSD. And you can see there's a lot of them. There's 30. So let's just go through real quick. The first one is the emotional numbing that I talked about, and it's an attempt to wall off feelings. So when we are, I wonder if I can read this on my glasses, yeah. When we are in these situations that are really overwhelming to our psyche, one of the ways that we try to protect ourselves is by this numbing to wall off our feelings. Like in Vietnam, for the first 6 months of my Vietnam experience, I wasn't numb and walled off. But I had a horrendous experience right in the middle that caused me to, I did it actually consciously because I was trying to get out of the OR. I was just too much, it was too much. It was one particular guy and what happened to him and being in his blood and all of that was just, I'm not going to go into all of it, but it was such that I went to my chief nurse and I said, you got to get me out of here. I can't take it anymore. Put me on the malaria ward or something. And she said, oh, you just need a few days off. She was wrong, but so she sent me down to Vung Tau. I don't know how many of you, you're not Vietnam, you know, Vung Tau anyway. It was a beach place. So I went to Vung Tau and I drank beer, ate pineapples, talked to the Australian guys. And I literally focused on building a brick wall around my heart so that I could, oops, I forgot about that thing. So I can go back to work. And so when I went back, I was able to function, but I was different. I didn't realize it. I really didn't realize it. But all of my memories from that moment on, all my memories changed. No longer were they vivid color. They changed. They were like, not exactly black and white, they're more like brown and white. It's like sepia color. All the memories changed. But I'm saying that this emotional numbing is what people do that have PTSD, to wall off their feelings because it's too overwhelming to deal with. And so one of the things in therapy is to bring that down. But you have to be in a safe situation, a safe environment, and have learn ways to cope and deal with opening up to all that. So, let's see, how much, we're done what, 2:05? Okay, so we're good. So then depression. If you know anybody that has PTSD or if you have it, you know that you get depressed at times and it's really heavy and despairing. Alienation. So this is from the emotional numbing. You're split off from your feelings, but it splits you off from yourself and others. So that's where that comes in, Ray, right there. Alienation means that it's really hard to connect with other people. And it's because you're not connected to yourself. So good therapy helps you reconnect to all of you, all your feelings, and then you can connect with other people. I don't know how the VA does with that part of it. And then anger and rage. You know, particularly Vietnam vets. Anybody know a Vietnam vet that didn't experience anger and rage? So if you were sexually assaulted, of course you're going to feel anger and rage because you were helpless and couldn't do anything, you couldn't fight back. Guilt. So guilt could be, why didn't I move faster? Why didn't I get out of the way? One of the women whose story is not in the book, because she wouldn't allow me to, she was airborne, military police, very fit, extremely fit. And she was raped by her commander. And to this day, she is full of anger and rage because she still believes she should have been able to stop it from happening. Yeah, because she was so strong and fit. But, you know, when somebody is plotting and they're in charge of the whole thing, it doesn't matter how powerful or strong you are, you're going to get overcome by it. So anxiety and fears, these might be specific to the type of event that it was. If you're in an automobile accident, flood, or in the war. We used to have rats that ran along the 2x4s above my bed, so I had an inordinate fear of rats, right? Let's see, intrusive thoughts. Anybody have intrusive thoughts? Yeah, they're really horrible because they come on their own, unbidden. You don't want them there, and they're there. And sometimes they're like daggers, just jabbing at you, intrusive thoughts. So they're uninvited, and they're very intrusive. Nightmares, flashbacks. So does everybody know what a flashback is? Is there anybody that doesn't know what a flashback is? Okay, good. Helplessness, hyperarousal, being on guard, tense, hypervigilant, hypersensitivity to anything that reminds you of the traumatic event or experience. So here's where a lot of smells come in. So vets, and you know, some of you know this, you could be out in public somewhere and get a whiff of something that was like something back in the midst of the trauma. And especially the olfactory, the smell, it goes right into the brain, right in there. And so that one thing could trigger you, just that one smell. Like me, I, as a nurse, what brought the casualties? Helicopters. So I could be anywhere in the world. I hear a helicopter, my whole body gets ready for casualties. Avoidance of activities that trigger recall of the trauma. So those of you that have PTSD know that you don't want to go anywhere where you're going to be in any way triggered or reminded of what happened to whatever it is that is your trauma. So that's what that means. Isolation, that goes along with the numbing, feeling distant to others, staying to yourself, and that's what a lot of people with PTSD do. Mental turmoil. So this, I want to go over this one. So you're trying to deal with the world outside and your own inner world while staying safe, feeling safe, blocking your feelings, taking care of flashbacks or blocking them, and then the intrusive thoughts, and at the same time trying to understand what's happening to you. Just that one thing alone is in itself pretty horrendous to deal with, right? The mental turmoil of having PTSD. Attempts at control. So this is really, what I'm talking about here is, it often happens like right after the trauma. So what a lot of the women do, and I don't know if this happens to the men, but what the women do is they'll often take showers for hours. Literally showers for hours, trying to get it all off. Yeah. So these little attempts at control often happen right after the trauma. So like, let's say your car gets demolished in an accident and you're trying to put the hubcap on. It's a simple little thing that makes no logical sense, but it gives you something to do and focus on rather than the traumatic thing that happened, right? Emotional lability. I don't know if you've ever heard that word. So what this is, it's believing if you get angry, you might kill someone. It's like, it goes all the way to the extreme. Or if I start crying, I won't be able to stop. And then number 18 we're up to, fear of the replay of the traumatic event or experiences, fear of flashbacks, memories of the event. So I can tell you from my own experience that, so this was back before I did my healing work, and I was in my PTSD at the time, and I was actually driving to Tacoma to work, and there was an Army truck on the road right in the lane beside me. It was just a regular Army truck, except that it triggered me, and all of a sudden it was not just a simple Army truck. It was filled with the faces and bodies of all the soldiers that I remembered, and their faces and their eyes, the pleading eyes, all of that. It was just filled with it. And that was actually my first flashback. You know, you don't ever forget that. So I'm on the freeway, and I was in not all the way over, but I was in pretty far over in the lane, and I'm holding on to the right white knuckle, and all I could think of, I've got to get off the freeway, right? I got to get off here. And so I did. I pulled off, and my whole body was shaking at the time. And I never, ever wanted to have, whatever that was, I didn't want to have another one of those ever again. And I used to think that I could stop them. That was back before I knew any of the stuff I'm telling you. So that's the fear of replay of the traumatic experience and fear of flashbacks and memories of the events. It's fear that it's going to happen again. Difficulty concentrating. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Crying spells. Suicidal thoughts, feelings, and actions. Loss of memory. And that often occurs after the numbing sets in. And you can lose memories of the event or parts of it. Like I still have there's still a part of my memory, the day in Vietnam when I say that I snapped, I remember like the first part, and then there's another part that I don't remember of my memory, and I've never gotten that part back. 23, negative self-image. This is very, very true when there's been military sexual trauma, that you have low self-esteem and your image of yourself is very negative. Problems with intimacy, can't trust yourself or others. And then there's this one on here that's called elite. No one could possibly understand what happened to me or how I feel after the traumatic event or experience. It's just that kind. Contaminated, feeling contaminated for life, never be the same again. Loss of interest in work and activities, fatigue. And the fatigue comes from the psychic energy used to defend yourself against the feelings and the intrusive thoughts and memories. And then the last one is cynicism, lack of trust in authorities and systems, which was really, really true for the Vietnam vets. And I don't know if that's as true today for Iraq and Afghanistan vets, but it definitely was true for the Vietnam era vets. So women who've experienced military sexual trauma can have a full body reaction to the presence of men, especially if they're in close proximity with them, and if you're coming from behind. So as your Veterans for Peace, just be sensitive and aware of that. If you're around women veterans, or if you think it might be a woman veteran, and you're coming just because of the direction that you're going in, you're coming up behind them, it's a good idea to use your voice before you get too close and say something. You know, my name is David, and my name is Jean, and I just want you to know I'm walking up toward you from behind, and I'm aware of you, and I'm not going to hurt you.
Very fast.
That's right. Very right, yes. If you know that they've been sexually assaulted, then definitely never come up from behind. Yeah.
Same is true for male also.
Male, yeah. If you know, yeah. So it's just about being aware. So military sexual assault, harassment, and rape have escalated in recent years, and now there are over 26,000 a year. We know that. 71 per day. Every 20 minutes, one of our service members is being sexually assaulted. Rape by soldiers, commanders, doctors, and gang rape of our men and women in the military must be stopped. In 2012, there was a 35% increase in military sexual assaults. Between January and September of this last year, 2013, up 50%. And we know that 23% are assaulted at our military academies. You'd think the elite in the military academies would be above that? No. This is the statistic I want you to remember. 95% of the rapes and assaults to military personnel are from repeat offenders and serial rapists. So there is a criminal element in our military that is literally destroying it. Perpetrators can calmly sit down and claim that the rape they did was consensual sex, and that's And that's problematic, but you know what's even more of a problem from my perspective? The commander accepts it because he likes this guy, because these guys are very likable. And they're good soldiers, except they do all this horrible stuff. When a rapist confesses, which is relatively rare, but when a rapist confesses, the military ignores the confession and instead charges the woman with making false statements and basically makes her life a living hell. They violate her rights and make her life a living hell. And there's a story in here, Sally Griffith's story in here, and you'll see what happened to her. 62% of the women who report sexual assault are retaliated against very severely and often lose their health, their careers, and in some cases their lives. I don't know, I think men tend not to report it. I think we find out about men after the fact, like after they get out. Military sexual assault changes everything. So our military, our military does, it has this so-called zero tolerance policy, and they tout that, but do you know that they foster a culture that supports rampant sexual assault? So a woman or man who experiences sexual assault may never be the same again. She or he may never feel safe or confident again, and depending on how others respond to them after the assault, they may be able to heal and move on. But if they're not believed, or if they're doubted, or they're shamed, or they're humiliated, or not given the care that they need immediately, if they're not treated with dignity and respect and without compassion, then they're likely to be left with serious symptoms that may become permanent. So a lot has to do with how they are dealt with and received when they report, right, afterwards. The way that our military handles sexual assault is disrespectful, cold, and harsh. Women are shamed, humiliated, denied compassion, denied medical care, protection, and they're also denied appropriate investigations and prosecutions of perpetrators. Women who are sexually assaulted in the military and report it are denied justice. That's actually the reason that I decided to write the book. So I want to tell you a story. Petty Officer DeRoche, Navy, was raped by 2 sailors repeatedly in one session, right? Kind of a gang rape thing. They each took turns raping her. And she was taken for examination, a medical examination. The doctor became emotionally distraught at the damage that was done to her. After his examination, she was put on a medical ward, and she was held there as a prisoner and denied food. That's the kind of retaliation I'm talking about. Then she was made to be on call 24 hours a day so that she couldn't seek help, medical or counseling help. That's the way the military is handling this. So we need to find a way in our military to hold offenders accountable and to punish criminal behavior, and they're not currently doing that. I want to tell you a guy's story, Michael. Michael's a guy that I met actually on the radio. So Michael had not told his story for 19 years. And then he decided to come out and tell his story. And so he was telling a story, and he was on the radio telling a story. And a guy heard him that was active duty from Afghanistan. And he heard Michael telling a story. And this active duty soldier from Afghanistan was actually home at the time that he heard this. And he had come home specifically to kill himself because he had been drugged and raped over there. And he'd come home to kill himself, but he heard Michael on the radio telling his story, and he heard that phone number. And he called Michael, and he talked to Michael. And Michael was just new at telling his story. But because that guy called him, he is alive today. And he was able to get help and didn't have to go back to Afghanistan. But it's really important to tell the story. And Michael, I asked Michael when I talked to him on the phone the other day, I asked him, what did he want me to tell you? There it is, a little note. What could I share with you? And he said to tell you that it's not your fault, and you're not lesser because of it, and to speak out and tell your story. Because if you speak out and tell your story, you're more likely to help other guys. So that was what Michael. So this guy, I don't know how many of you know this guy. This is Jeremiah Arbogast. He's a survivor. And he has been telling his story. And he's paralyzed from the waist down because he tried to kill himself. Yeah, and he's a very brave man. Yes, it happens to men and women, and it's happening more and more, and it has to be stopped. And that's the passion with which I ultimately wrote this book, even though I didn't start out there. So if you are interested in the book, there are copies downstairs. My publisher's actually downstairs, and there are copies, and I'm happy to write a personal note in it. But what I want to do right now is I want to teach you emotional freedom technique, because it's like having your own personal power tool. It's a great technique, and it will help move energy through. It will help you deal with symptoms, if any of you are still having symptoms. And if it would help if one of you would volunteer to let me teach you and go through this with you, because then you get the benefit of doing it, you'll all get to see it, and you'll see how it works. So somebody having something going on that you want to do, help you with it? Anybody having any anxiety, tension, pain, headache?
You're talking about in relation to being a victim of?
It doesn't have to be. It can be anything right now. I just want to teach you this technique.
I'll do it.
Emotional.
Reason I'm interested is that I've had 3 significant relationships in my life. 2 marriages, 1 girlfriend. All 3 were sexually violent.
Well.
And it has really affected me over my life.
Yeah, it will.
And so it's like it's kept me out of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. I mean, it's really difficult. That was one of my questions. What kind of help is there for spouses of people who've been sexually?
There is help for spouses and partners. In fact, I used to know a man that wrote a book about specifically for spouses. I don't remember the name now. It's been quite a long time, but there is help, and you can get help. And so EFT is a good way to deal with it. EFT can help you with. I gave you a copy of the protocols here, so you can read it, and it's better if you see it, you see me do it, hear me do it, experience it, and then this will all make sense. But it actually breaks the connection between your brain and the memories, it unwires the trauma. The idea in EFT is that you have energy that runs through your body. We want that energy to flow freely and smoothly. If it's blocked or if it's disrupted or out of balance in some way, then EFT can actually help it to flow freely and be in balance, and everything feels better. I can tell you I've been using this technique for a really long time, and I work with all kinds of people, veterans and active duty people and civilians, and it works really fast, instantly. I mean, I have my clients doing it a lot, all the time. But like a new person will come in that's up here with anxiety, and I can bring him down in 5 minutes. So that's why I call it a power tool.
Sarah, I just want to know, I said something 10 years ago, when I called somebody my sister, or sister-in-laws, I mean it. And if I'm complicit in what happened to them, I am involved in that what happened to them. Sometimes I am
You're complicit if you know about it, if you know it's happening and you don't do anything.
Yes, so that's why when you raise the voice, that, this is what happened, and from the top down, they tell you to keep your mouth shut.
That's right. That's
so
right.
She's been told to keep her mouth shut.
That's right.
She comes crying to me, and I raise my voice appropriately
Yes.
and reasonably and gently that this is happening.
Uh-huh.
And it's not many people, it's very few rotten apples which are doing it to several people, several female soldiers.
Right. It's not a few rotten apples, though. There's quite
I know.
a lot of them.
Some units it can be just.
Oh, some units, yeah.
Yeah, one or two, and then they're
Right.
doing it to so many others.
Yes.
And
right.
once you raise your voice, then a person who's doing it in consciousness has to pay a price.
Has to what?
Pay a price for raising the issue.
Yes, they will. Yeah, because
What is wrong with that statement when somebody says that, if I don't raise, concern for this, what happened to this so-and-so soldier, I'm complicit in that crime which has occurred in the recent past.
right.
What is wrong with saying that? How else can you raise consciousness?
You're right.
Commanders or even chaplains, and then tell you to sweep it under the carpet.
You're right, because that's the protocol. It's in all of the military services. The protocol is to protect the image of the Corps, protect the military. That's a lot of what I wrote about in there, and they've been doing it for decades, and they don't want to give it up. Even now, they're holding on to their power and control in the military so that it's not taken away from them in these cases. And a lot of us are working to get it taken away from them, because as long as the chain of command has as much power and authority as they do, this is not going to change. You're not safe to speak up, and neither is the victim of the assault.
We raise awareness of what to say. I mean, if you can't even say that in the most.
Right. Well, my idea with the reason I wrote the book is to shine a light on what's happening, get enough of the public to know what's actually happening in the military, so they raise their voices. These are civilians, the public, and veterans, right? To get the public, to get Congress to actually act, take a particular action that will take authority of these cases out of the chain of command, right? And start really changing the culture in the military. I think they need to discharge these 95% rapists, right? Because they and the commanders that cover up for them, as long as that goes on, it's going to continue, but it's not good for people who really care and who really serve well and who hold to the values that we all appreciate, where you don't assault other members of the military, right? So who wants to, were you volunteering?
What do you mean?
Okay, just pull a chair. Sit here. So the issue is the pain you have about the relationships? Is that what it is? Okay. So let's do this. So I'm going to teach you as well as everybody else. So the first place we're going to tap, and what we're doing is we're literally tapping into the energy system in your body. There are places on your body where the energy is closer to the surface, so we can tap. And this is a particular sequence that we're going to do, the tapping sequence, and you have it written down, so you don't have to write anything. It's all there, and just abbreviate it. So once you see it, and if you practice it, if you go home and try it out on something even innocuous, you can't hurt yourself with it, then you'll get it, you'll learn it. Once you learn the protocol and you learn how to do it, then it's easy. So the first place we're going to tap is right here between the bottom of the pinky and the wrist. Tap like this, a couple fingers. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go around to all the places with him, and then you can do it with us, okay? So even though I've had these painful experiences with women, say that with me. Even though
I've had these painful experiences with women.
I'm ready to, let's see, how would she say this? I'm ready to change that.
I'm ready to change
I'm calling to myself a healthy relationship with a woman.
I'm calling to myself a healthy relationship with a woman.
Great. I deeply and completely
I deeply and completely
love and accept myself.
love and accept myself.
Great. Okay. Next place is right here on your eyebrows, right in the corner. This corner by your nose. See where I'm pointing? No, up. Yeah, up in, like right here. You there? Right there. Got it? Yeah, right there. You see it? Here? Okay. So, yeah, right there.
So I take my glasses off.
It's probably better. Get in the way. Even though I've had these painful experiences with women in relationships,
even though I've had painful experiences with women in relationships,
I know I don't need to.
I know I don't need to.
I can make it different.
I can make a difference.
I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
I deeply and completely love myself.
Love and accept myself.
Love and accept myself.
Okay, the next one is right here. Let me show you where it is. You feel that? You feel that in there? So there's a little place in here where the, yeah, you got it. Yeah, you're on the bone. See it? On the bone, right here. Yeah, both sides. And do both sides. So, even though I've had these painful experiences with women in relationships,
even though I've had painful experiences with women in relationships,
I know I can change it.
I know I can change it.
And I will.
And I will.
I deeply and completely
I deeply and completely
love and accept myself.
love and accept myself.
Great. Next one is under your eye. So there's a curved bone under your eye, and you want to be in the middle. Point your fingers down right in the middle of that. Yeah, and you're on the bone. You're on the bone there?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Right in the middle. Yeah, that's it. Good. Got it? Okay. Even though I've had these painful experiences with women in relationships,
even though I've had painful experiences with women in relationships,
I know I can change it,
I know I can change it.
and I will.
And I will.
I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
I deeply and completely love myself.
Love and accept myself.
I completely love and accept myself.
Okay. Next one is under your nose. So right here. Right in there. Under the nose, right here. Yeah.
Sarah, thank you very much. The next group will be in here in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
So, I know
All right.
you want to finish up what you're doing.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you.
Even though, you can just use one hand on this one. Even though
Even
I've had these painful experiences with women in relationships,
though I've had painful experiences with women in relationships,
I know I don't need to,
I know I don't need to,
and I'm ready to change that.
and I'm ready to change that.
I deeply and completely
I
deeply and completely
deeply and completely
love and accept myself.
love and accept myself.
Good. Next is right here. Chin, right in there. Yeah. Even though I've had these painful experiences with women in relationships,
even though I've had painful experiences with women in relationships,
I know I don't have to.
I know I don't have to.
I can change it.
I can change it
I deeply and completely
deeply and completely.
love and accept myself.
Love and accept myself.
Right. Now the next one is find your collarbones. And then you want to take your fingers like this. Feel this place where they dip in? That's where you want to go, right in there. So find your collarbones, and then take your fingers in a diagonal till they dip in. There's a place where they dip in. Let me see. Like this. So it could be like this. Feel that? You feel that place?
Yeah, okay, got it.
Good. So you find your collarbones like that, and just go like that. Should be a place where your fingers just go right in. Feel
Okay.
that? Okay. even though I've had these painful experiences with women in relationships.
Even though I've had these painful experiences with women in relationships.
I know it's not necessary.
I know it's not necessary.
I can make it different,
I can make it different.
and I will.
And I will.
I deeply and completely
I deeply and completely
love and accept myself.
love and accept myself.
Great. Now next, are you right or left-handed?
Right-handed.
Okay. So the next one is right here on your side, like this. Take this hand, and then these fingers and tap. So it's like where the seam is, like this. Yeah, it's better to take your coat off. Yeah. See it? So, even though
Even though
I've had these painful experiences with women in relationships,
I've had these painful experiences with women in relationships,
I know it's not necessary.
I know it's not necessary.
I deserve better.
I deserve better.
I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
Great. The last one is on top of your head, right in the middle here. Tap. Right in the middle. Yeah. Tap. Yeah. You can use your finger, all your fingers if you want. Yeah. That is where your soft spot was when you were a baby.
Okay.
Okay. Even though
Even though
I've had these painful experiences with women in
I've
relationships,
had these painful experiences with women in relationships,
I know it's not necessary.
I know it's not necessary.
I can make it different.
I can make a difference.
I deserve better.
I deserve better.
I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
Great. That's it. That's the technique.
Wow.
So, anxiety, depression, body pain, emotional distress, PTSD symptoms, what you need to do, tap them down. So the first thing you do is you identify how distressful is the experience you're having. Anxiety, fear, whatever it is. So you measure it. 0's none, 10's the highest. All right? Somewhere between 0 and 10. You measure. So let's say you're 9. Okay? Then you want to tap it down to 0. And so you tap around and check in. How you feeling? Okay, well, now I'm an 8. Great, bring it down. Oh, now I'm a 6.
So this technique really helps you to bring your anxiety.
Anxiety down, depression down,
Okay.
headaches down, flashbacks down, you name it. There's a, if you want to know more about it, there's a lot written about it too. Gary Craig, Emotional Freedom Technique. And there's a great film called Operation Emotional Freedom, The Answer. And you'll see this done on Vietnam vets that nobody could help. And this guy, Gary Craig, brought them together, brought a bunch of experts, and they worked with them over the course of 5 days, and all of them went out totally changed.
Wow.
And he did this at the VA. He showed the VA how powerful it was, and they were very successful. And you would think that the VA would want to offer that to our veterans, right? No, they didn't. They have this thing with the pharmaceutical company, they just want to drug you. So,
Thank you.
all right.
Very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, you're welcome.